Even the most casual listeners to this show will no doubt be aware of the saving and investment scheme that's expected to be introduced in the upcoming budget. But will it be the game changer that Simon Harris is promising? And will it actually work? And most importantly, what will it mean for your pocket? Eoin McGee, you have actually dedicated a 3-part series of your own podcast to this very topic.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do we actually know so far?
What they're talking about doing is introducing a scheme that makes it really simple, really straightforward, and really tax efficient to invest money. And when we're talking about investing money, we're talking about taking money out of bank accounts and buying stuff like shares and bonds. And we'll get back to that in a little while. But this is not the first time this has been done. It's been done in lots of countries. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? I'm a financial planner and I'm a nerd. All right. And this is the financial planner's plastic bag levy smoking ban moment. Because in a year where we just introduced auto enrollment at the My Future Fund, to be considering introducing this at the same time, we literally, if they can get this right, and that's a big if they can get this right, they literally could change the financial future of the people of Ireland. Not today, not tomorrow. I'm talking in years to come if they can get this right. And I had to sit back and say to myself, okay, there's a chance that this thing is going to fall flat on its face. And if I get behind it now and I talk about it with you and talk about it and do a podcast myself on it and put it out there on Instagram or whatever else, and it falls flat on its face, I will look like an idiot and he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? For stuff that's totally outside of my control. But I did sit back and say, I think this is a good thing for the people of Ireland. And I want to do everything I can to try and influence where I can what it looks like when it's created, and to try and give people the information they need to be comfortable about doing it themselves. Because this really will be a game changer in the long term for people if we can get it right. And that's the important thing. And I do think there's lots of places that could fall down. We can go into them if we want to. But ultimately, I think what people need to try and understand about this is we're not reinventing the wheel here. Like, this is happening, particularly in the UK. Most people who have relatives or cousins, if you ask them, or friends or whatever living in the UK, or even people who've just moved over recently, if you've got an ISA, everyone knows what an ISA is over there. Even if you haven't got one yourself, you've heard of it, right? And it's the same in lots of other countries, not just the UK. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. Something similar to that, but ideally better.
So you were actually part of a group of finfluencers invited by Simon Harris to a roundtable discussion on the scheme. What was that like?
In general, the room itself definitely felt like it was a positive experience. People liked the intention of it. There were certain things we didn't agree on in terms of little things, that the mechanics of it. But one of the things I did do in episode 1 of the Understanding Money podcast, I went over to Boston. I flew to Boston and I met with a guy called Robert C. Merton, Professor Robert C. Merton. And when I'm studying, and anyone who's done their QFA, maybe not QFA, but certainly CFP, maybe QFA now at this stage as well, but he always comes up in the textbook. So I would have read his name at 3 o'clock in the morning studying, right? So when I got the opportunity to interview him, I said, I'm going to Boston to do this. This is an opportunity to sit with this guy. And I got to sit with him in a room for 2 hours. In his 80s, he's still lecturing in MIT, but he has spent his career... Really, the bones of what he spent the latter part of his career is, how do we communicate with people about money? How do we make it simple? And his insight, when I really plugged him and said, what do you think if you had 30 seconds in a lift with the Irish government, what would you tell them to do? Right? And his message was very simple, like, make it simple.
Yes.
Make it really clear. And he used an analogy. I think I've given this analogy a couple of times and I didn't know where it came from, but he uses an analogy. When you drive your car from A to B, like, you just need to know what to press with your foot and how to steer the steering wheel. You don't understand what's going on there. Most of us don't understand what's going on underneath the bonnet, but neither do we need to. And actually, Katie, you and I can sit here and say, oh, what's the tax system going to be like? And what's this going to be like? And what's the structure of this thing going to be? And how does it compare to all the other structures we've seen in the past? Ultimately, for most people out there, what they want to know is if I have some money to spare on a month-to-month basis and I put it into the old scheme, what am I going to get out in the end? Compared to I put it into the new scheme, what am I going to get out at the end? And you know what? I'm saving for, I always use a boat. I'm saving for a boat. And if I do it the old way, I'll get a boat. And if I do it the new way, I'll get a bigger boat, right? And it needs to be as simple as that. And that's one of the key things. The communication on this thing, this investment scheme, needs to be so clear that we start at the end at the beginning. right? And we've a calculator. It's not signed off by my head of compliance yet, but we've a calculator that I've created that allows you to take the last 40 years of data, pump in any amount of money you want, and say, give me any period of time you want between 1985 and 2025. And you can say, I'd say probably 2001 was the worst 3-year period. And you can pick it, and it'll tell you, if you put it in, this is what the best result was, this is what the worst result was, this is what the average result was, and this is the result you would have got in that period that you chose. And it needs to be that simple. It needs.
So you're
to be,
saying like a plug and play kind of product.
Absolutely. And you know what? This is where we as a society need to lean in on the people who will ultimately profit from this. Like, this is going to be, I don't believe, nobody knows what the scheme's going to look like just yet, but this will be, I'm going to try and name them all so nobody says you were leaning into, but this is going to be an Irish Life, a Zurich, Aviva, Standard Life, New Ireland, Davies, trying to mention them all. Sorry if I missed you, right? But this is going to be one of these existing providers I expect are going to provide this product. They won't do it for free. They're going to do it because they're going to make money out of it, right? So therefore, I think government need to use the opportunity right now to say, we'll give you this thing, we'll do the real good in tax incentives, but you need to come up with a way that makes it so understandable for people. They can put it in and they're going to have a real good idea about what's the best outcome here, what's the worst outcome here, what's the average outcome here, so that they can see in monetary terms, not in percentages. I put in 50 quid a month, I get out X at the end. That's what I'm going to get. And you know what? Show them it compared to another scheme that you have, which will still be on the shelf and you can use, and show them the difference between the two.
Okay, so we're hoping for a very easy, accessible, plug and play type product. Do you think it'll be available the day after budget day?
No, I think it'll be available in January. If everything goes to plan, it'll be announced in budget. I would expect, or at least hope, that the product providers are working on it already. They can only do so much because they won't find out the budget day what the mechanics of this thing looks like. What does the tax look like? How does it work? So therefore, they won't be able to turn it on. But I think it would be hopeful that you would have it on the 1st of January. Whether we do or not, and whether it's pushed back a little while. But then there's also still a question, Katie, will we have it at all? Like, think about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is something that could just get shelved because, for this reason, that reason, another reason, we need to push this back. Yeah. And, like, we all know there's things that get put out there. And this is one of my biggest fears. I spend time with you in a podcast, I do my own podcast, and then it just doesn't happen. And I'm just going, that's probably worse than it not happen, than it failing, trying and failing, isn't it? Not trying at all. But I would expect if everything goes to plan, you'd be looking at the 1st of January. But we do need to understand what it's going to look like. And just to give people, because I've been talking about it for a while now, right? I would suspect it's going to be called something like a PIA, a personal investment account, something like that. We need to move away from the word savings, because this is not saving, this is investing, right? So we need to savings associated with deposit accounts and bank accounts. But I would suspect, and I'm sorry, before I go into what my best guess is, this is absolutely a guess, right? Because nobody knows until the minister stands up on budget day and says, this is what it is, what it's going to be like, because it could change 2 days beforehand, right? So even if you saw a document and said, this is what it looks like, it could still change. So what I suspect will happen is, I think there'll be a limit to how much you can put in each year. If we take the UK as an example, probably up to €20,000 a year. They're £20,000 sterling. So let's say it's €20,000 is the maximum you can put in each year. And then I think what will happen is that the first €30,000, I'm guessing, will be tax-free. So you won't pay any tax on the first 30,000 of your entire fund. But anything over that, you'll pay tax at probably 1% is what I'm guessing. So if you think about it, if you have 35,000 in the pot, that 5,000 over 30, you'll pay 1% tax on that. And that will be deducted on a year-to-year basis. So, and really importantly, and I think it'll fail miserably if this doesn't happen, that tax won't be your responsibility. It'll be the product provider's responsibility to deduct that tax and pay it over to revenue. And that would mean every time you take, or anytime you take money out of it, it'll already be tax paid. We're not putting a tax burden on people, that this is looked after. Now, that would be attractive, because right now, if you think about the way it works, you put your money aside, and every 8 years, or when you take the money out, whichever comes first, you pay tax at a rate of 38% on the profits. Now, what we're doing here with the other one over on the other side, it's 1% a year, but it's on the entire fund, your contributions and the profits, which some very clever people in Sweden, which the model kind of looks like, have said that's about a 20% tax is what it works out. Don't ask me to give you the maths because I haven't a clue. It's just, it's 20% is what it roughly works out on the profits. When you take into account that you're being taxed on your own money and the profit on it as well at a rate of 1% every year, it's equivalent of 20% overall is what it works out to be. So that's what it looks like. I do think that what they need to do in year one is keep it really simple, stupid, right? Like there's some people are talking about, oh, will it be able to do it for incentivize people to buy a house? And what about, can I do one for my kids? And there was kind of reference to that in the interview I did with the Tánaiste. And will my kids will they be able to set one up for my 1-year-old? And all those things. Let's just leave that to phase 2 and phase 3. Let's just get something up and running this year, because the more things bells and whistles we add to it now, the less chance we're going to have it on the 1st of January.
You're listening to Money Talks, sponsored by PTSB. PTSB brings the best of technology and people together for a better banking experience that's altogether more human. And now back to the show. So what about the people who are already investing away and, you know, are kind of getting slammed by deemed disposal? Do you think there'll be anything for them in the budget?
I question this as well, and one of the things that was really clear is, and if I could try and quote him word for word, it was something along, it's not word for word, because it was something along the line of, the reason for deemed disposal being introduced in the first place is no longer rational. Right. So it doesn't make sense that we still have deemed disposal, and why it was there and why it was introduced there's no case for it. And he was quite clear that he separates out these two things. There's this new investment scheme and there's deemed disposal, and they're two separate things. He was quite clear that he doesn't like deemed disposal and he would like to get rid of it. But again, political will he get the support to get rid of it? But I don't think it's, we can have an investment scheme or we can get rid of deemed disposal. I think there was certainly a strong suggestion we can have both here. For people who aren't familiar with deemed disposal, the way it works is you put money away, and when you take the money out, you pay 38% tax on the profit at the moment. It used to be 41, it's down to 38 now, since last year. But if you haven't taken it out on the 8th anniversary, you get hit with the 38% tax. Lots of people are very unhappy about that on the basis that you're taxing me on an unrealised gain. I haven't actually put any money in my pocket and you're taking taxes off me. That's not fair. And it's not fair. And it's right for people to be annoyed about it. But it is a big detraction for people who are getting hit with deemed disposal. There is a fear from me that some people are kind of going, oh, I have some money to invest, but I wait for the new investment scheme. Don't.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah,
you can see that in a lot of the forums and a lot of the letters we're getting in at the moment.
And even down to, I'll wait for deemed disposal to be gone and I might invest then. That doesn't make sense, because deemed disposal only hits you when you take the money out. It's not going to be, okay, from the 1st of January from now on, all the existing stuff will be deemed disposal and all the new stuff will be no deemed disposal. That would be shocking if that's what he did, and I would be really disappointed if that's what happened, because that would be retrospectively damaging people for doing the right thing. And I would suspect if deemed disposal if they get rid of it, it'll be gone for everyone. And whenever you take the money out after it does create an interesting one. You shouldn't take money out of an investment unless you need it. Like, my rule is always put it in when you have it, take it out when you need it, and leave a long time in between. Okay. Yes. And that's how you just get rid of all the market's ups and downs. But if someone's kind of sitting in September going, oh, I might take this out, but I don't need it till November, I probably would wait. Because or if you may not necessarily taking it out, because if you're taking it out, you're getting it. But where it does make a big difference is, say, we'd often see it, someone's paying, you could buy the same fund from a different provider, but you could buy it for cheaper, and you're moving from one to the other. You might wait till just after that, because if there's no deemed disposal on it, you're not getting hit with. So say you're in year 7.5, you're getting hit with 6 months' time for deemed disposal. I might as well move it from one provider to the other, because I'm getting hit in 6 months' time. But now you have a different calculation to do. Yeah. I've gone down a rabbit hole there. People don't need to worry about that one too much.
But what about this scheme itself? Do you think the money will be locked away, or people will have access to it?
One of the things, it's a really hard thing, because when people see locked away, right? When people see, oh, you can't access your money for 5 years, they'll be terrified about putting the money in, right? But one of the things you need to be aware of, this scheme is not putting money into it and take it out in 3 months' time to do a job on the garden or to replace the dishwasher or whatever it is, right? This is money you're putting away. I've talked about it how many times, Katie, the 5-year rule.
Yes.
The money going into this is only money that you don't see yourself needing in the next 5 years. Now, if you have an emergency, I don't believe the money should be locked away. And I don't think it's the products or the government's responsibility, or they should even play a part in people being responsible with this thing, right? Where you say, put the money away, leave it away for 5 years. It's interesting. I remember kind of 2011, 12, when there was a lot of people unemployed post-global financial crisis. And some of the companies said, we'd be talking to people about putting savings away into a long-term savings account. And people were like, yeah, but is it what's going to happen? Well, there's penalties in the first 3 years maybe, or the first 5 years if you take the money out. That's what it was like back then. And then one of the game changers was, but if you lose your job, the company will waive the penalties. Right?
Okay.
And all of a sudden people said, all right, so my biggest fear here is I'm going to lose my job and I'm going to need this money. There's going to be penalties to take it out. But actually, if you're telling me if I lose my job, the penalties are gone, I'm going to be okay. Right? I think there needs to be an element of that with this new scheme as well, because most people then didn't lose their job because, what did we end up, 15% unemployment? But most people didn't lose their job. 85% of people just kept going with the savings scheme, never lost their job. And here they are, whatever, 10, 15 years later, and the money is still in there, and the encashment penalties never made a difference to them.
Yes.
And I think it's that psychological barrier of, I can't put that money away because I might need it. But if you can lift some of them barriers, but still make sure everybody's aware this is a 5-year plus play. You don't want to be going into this thing if you want to take the money out in the first 5 years.
But this is the thing, if people have access to it, this is my fear with this scheme. If people did have access to the cash and they could take it out at any point with or without a penalty, I do worry about a crash coming kind of early on. Now, I don't have any particular reason to think that might happen, but, we're hearing a lot about, the AI bubble and all the rest of it. And you have a lot of first-time investors in this scheme. And when there's a crash, it always feels unprecedented, and it feels like this is the worst thing. And it's even though you or anyone else in that game knows that this is just the way markets move.
Yeah.
And it could trigger sort of panic selling behavior. And there's no education piece kind of baked into this yet. I know they're talking about financial literacy, but I almost feel that specifically needs to be explained to people.
I think you're right. I don't think you need to be hesitant about saying there's a crash coming. Katie, there is a crash coming, because there's always a crash coming.
Sure.
Right? We have a crash every 3 to 5 years on average. Think about it, right? We had COVID. We had Brexit / Trump won. We had the global financial crisis. We had .com. We had the Russian crisis, the Asian crisis, the oil crisis. We had Black Monday. We're back to the late 80s already. They happen roughly every 3 to 5 years apart. And guess what? They're part of investing. When you're a seasoned investor, if there is such a thing, when you're used to this stuff, right? What you realise, there's a couple of things you realise. First thing you realise is 80% of stock market crashes have fully fixed themselves, fully recovered within a 3-year period. Okay? I don't call them stock market crashes. I call them temporary declines. They're a decline and they're temporary. They will fix themselves. But the second thing you really need to realise when you're investing money like this is, and particularly if you're doing it on a month-to-month basis, right? The best thing that could happen to you is, imagine you went in for 5 years, right? Let's say the best thing that could happen is that the first 4 years and 11 months, the markets are on the floor. And then the last month it rockets. The best thing that can happen in your investment is, when you're putting the money in on a month-to-month basis, is that there is a crash at the start. The problem is, I wrote an article for you at one stage in here in the Independent, and I'm sure you can link it in the thing. But it was about...
It was after the Nvidia crash.
Yes, and it was about the idea when everyone else is running away, where the rich people are running in, or something that the seasoned investor is running in. And this is the type of messaging government are now responsible to make sure that this message gets out, that people have the information available to them to be able to make the right decisions with this money. That when the crash comes, not if, when the crash comes, they know this is actually a good thing. I'm not taking my money out today. And people can often think about it in house prices. There were people who picked up houses in 2012 and 2013, and they could say, oh yeah, I'm totally making up the number. That house was 300,000 5 years ago. It's now 150,000. This is great value. But it's the opposite when people think about shares. Oh, that share was trading at €1. Now it's trading at 50 cents. It must be something wrong with it. No, it's just a sale. It's just a discount. Yes. And you're picking it up. The company is still as valid as it was before. It's one of the only things, like, I'll give you an analogy actually. I think the analogy works better than the housing, right? Imagine you walked into a garage today and you were looking at a car, and the car was, I don't know, €30,000, second-hand car, €30,000. And you go home tonight and you say, I'm going to buy that car. And you go back into the garage tomorrow morning. And as you walk in the door, the salesperson comes up, guess what? Stuff happened overnight, and that car for 30 grand is 25 now. Do you want to buy it? Absolutely. Same car as yesterday. Absolutely going to buy it. That's a 5 grand discount on the 30 grand car. That's rational. But what do we do when it comes to shares? Oh, the shares are down. It's cheaper than it was yesterday. I don't want to put money into it. I don't want to buy it for cheaper.
Yes.
And that's the mentality and the type of messaging that needs to get out there when it comes to trying to get a country that doesn't investing money for the first time.
Yeah.
And there's a thing, I can imagine this tagline. If anyone in government is listening to this, or the Department of Finance, they can have it, right? But I see a really good commercial ad running, whatever you want to call it, campaign out there. The question is, are you an investor? Because right now we save loads of money. We are savers. We
Yes.
save €1 in every €8 we earn.
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it's fear. I think part of it's like, oh, 2008 might happen again. Some people still remember Aircom. Some people remember the damage that was done to their parents maybe, or even some of their relatives, about bank shares and how that looks. I think it's inherently built into us that we try to save for a rainy day. I think our media is quite negative, so we're quite negative
Yes.
when it comes to long-term financial futures. And I think it gives us helps us sleep at night. But I also think we're quite disciplined. And I think that when it comes to this thing, we are a nation of savers. But I think if we can start asking, are you an investor? Mm-hmm. Imagine, like, if you're in the States, they sit around at dinner tables and they say, oh, I bought this share and I bought that share. And and it's an acceptable thing, right? But imagine a 22-year-old in a pub at the weekend saying, are you an investor? And slagging his mate because he's not, or her mate because she's not. And that's the kind of messaging we need to get out there, because ultimately we work hard for our money, we save well, but our money doesn't work hard for us. Yes. And that's 1 in 5 people in Ireland will have some type of financial instrument, an investment product. 1 in 2 people in Sweden will.
That's just wild, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's just not our culture. When we make money, what do? We buy property. Why? Because that's what our parents did. If anyone you knew had a bit of money, what did they? Oh, I've a load of property. Bought loads of property, right? Why? Because we can see it. We can touch it. We can feel it. We understand it. And not only that, the rent comes into our bank account once a month. And you're kind of going, this makes sense to me. Yeah, this works. What we don't look at is we bought it for 100 grand, sold it for 150 grand, and we think we made 50 grand on that. We don't look at the boiler that we paid for, or the painting that we did, and the upkeep that we did, and the interest on the mortgage we paid, and all of that stuff. So we're kind of clouded by it as well, but because we understand that we do it.
Yeah.
Like in a globally constructed, well-diversified portfolio right now, have about 5% exposure to property. In Ireland, nearly 70% of our wealth is tied up in land and property. They were obsessed with it, right? And we need to find another way that's much more liquid, that works, that's proven to work, and that we get comfortable with, because we're making our financial lives much harder than it needs to be.
But the reality is there's a lot of people in Ireland today who are struggling to even get a few bob together for Christmas.
Yep.
So the idea of them being able to access this scheme, it's just not on the table for them.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's horrible. And it's a horrible place to be when you don't know how you're feeding the kids next week, never mind next month. You don't know how when the weather turns, how you're going to keep the heating going all winter. Those are things that, they are problems and horrible situations that exist and that people are living in, okay? And I believe as a society we have a responsibility to help those people out as much as we possibly can, to get them into a position where they can avail of a scheme like this. Notwithstanding that, though, Katie, the reality is there are people in the country who are doing okay. And you know what? It's okay to be okay. Like, you don't have to, just because there's certain people suffering, you do what you can for them. And as a society, we absolutely should support them. And it's a bit like, to totally change it, it's a bit like an investment scheme and deemed disposal. We can probably have both. We can probably help out the people who are really struggling and allow people who are doing okay, be okay, and still invest the money. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have both going on at the same time, but we don't, in the same way we shouldn't ignore people who are really struggling. We absolutely shouldn't. But we also can't continue to ignore people who are doing well. And they can't be left on the shelf because, you know what, we have to concentrate on this all. And yes, that's the problem of a politician. They have to get that balance right. And you know what, that's one of the problems we all have with our political system. There's no long-term thinking in it. But if you think about this, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years from now, if this thing is successful, this country will have more money. This country will be able to spend more money, which means there'll be more VAT coming in, which means there'll be more taxes coming in, which means we'll be a wealthier society. And the wealthier the society is, in general, the more we can look after the people who are down on their luck or having a difficult time.
So that's the best case scenario.
Yes.
What's the worst case scenario?
In terms of if the scheme doesn't work?
Yeah.
I think the worst case scenario is that it doesn't go. Actually, probably you gave me a new fear. The new fear is what we talked about earlier, that it just doesn't happen at all and just gets put on the shelf and nothing happens. And I spent my summer kind of going around and doing podcasts and doing stuff that never actually happened. Yeah. Right? That's probably the worst case. The other problem is that it actually does launch. I think that the launch, and it becomes a political football of some description, and there's a lot of back and forth in the Dáil and in the media about how could you give this money to these rich people when these people down here are struggling on a month-to-month basis, right? Which is valid, but we need to do both. Like, politicians are there to serve all of society, right? That's what they're there to do. And I think if this doesn't get off the ground and the communication is not right, if it's not made really simple, if we can't change a country into a country of investors for the people who have the ability to do this, I think we could miss our shot, and it'll be another generation again before we get the shot again at doing it. If this doesn't work this time, you may put it on the shelf for 10 or 15 years before you can even consider doing it again, is my opinion on it. Because it will just be one of those hot potatoes that this needs a political support. This needs political will behind it. It needs media behind it. It needs public opinion behind it, because that's the only way it's getting across the line. And I'm doing my best to try and get it out there. I have no axe to grind in this. There's no reason for me to do this, except I think it's the right thing for people to do. And I would like to try and influence as best I can what it's going to look like. But most importantly of all, what it looks like is less important than the communication on it. The communication needs to be really strong on this. It needs to be really clever. I think they did a really good job on auto-enrollment. I think one of the interesting things, the ads have just been updated. I don't know if you've noticed them, but in the first 6 months of auto-enrollment, my future fund, is the kind of more branding on it. My future fund, for people who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, if you didn't have a pension before the 1st of January, you went into one on 1st of January. The reason why it's called auto-enrollment is because traditionally you have to sign forms to join the pension scheme and work. And with this, you automatically get enrolled in the pension scheme, and you have to sign forms if you don't want to join the pension scheme. So it's the opposite, right? But there's 400 million gone in the first 6 months. And that's the ad that's playing at the moment. I'm sure you've heard it, right? 400 million gone into my future fund in the first 6 months. Like, that's 400 million more the people of Ireland have now, 6 months into this scheme, that they didn't have or wouldn't have had if auto-enrollment hadn't been introduced. And if you think about it, where are we going to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time? If we don't introduce the scheme, probably the same place. 1 in 5 people will have a financial instrument. The people who are able to do it are doing it. The people, and even probably some of the people who are able to do it that could be doing it aren't doing it because they don't know what to do, and it's not simple and straightforward to them. So I think we've one shot to get this right in this generation, and in this decade, I would suggest. We've one shot to get it right, and I really hope the communication is right. I hope it's simple. I hope it's straightforward. I hope people buy into it, and I hope it's really accessible. And what I mean by accessible, I want the minimum premiums on a month-to-month basis to be really, really low. And I think government need to put pressure on the product providers. Product providers don't like taking less than 100 quid a month, or they don't like taking 50 quid a month, because the administration is expensive on this. And to do that, they have to administer it on a month-to-month basis. And I think this is where government really needs to say, we're giving you this. Look at my future fund. We had 400 million in it the first 6 months. They didn't necessarily get a piece of that. That's gone off into a centralised thing. And you want a shot at this? Well, then you need to accept that some of the premium is going to be low and some of the premium is going to be high, and you're going to get a maximum of 20,000 euros a year, and maybe it's going to be a loss leader for you, but you want it, you need to come to the table here and make sure you're doing it for some of the right reasons that everybody else wants it to work.
Eoin McGee, thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.